They laughed when I handed them the gift I'd made with aching hands and sleepless nights. "Just send money next time," they said, smiling like I hadn't poured myself into every stitch. That was the moment I stopped being silent. I never meant to fight, but they made it a war, and I wasn't about to lose my own name without a battle. Saturday mornings used to be mine, just mine. I'd wake up to the soft hiss of the kettle and the creak of the wood floors in that comforting, familiar rhythm. I'd set out 2 mugs even though it had been years since Paul passed, and I'd listen to jazz records while flipping pancakes. One for me, one for the memory of what used to be. My world was slow, quiet, and blessedly mine, until the invitations started coming less out of love and more out of obligation. And even those began to feel optional. This Christmas, I decided to do what I've always done. Make something with my hands. I started on the family tablecloth in early November. I stitched each name: Jenny, Tom, the grandkids, even that new boyfriend my youngest granddaughter brought to Thanksgiving last year. I picked cinnamon-toned thread and ivory linen, the kind that wrinkles like good memories and costs too much to justify, but makes you feel like you've given something real. I worked every morning, even when the joints in my thumbs swelled to the size of grapes. I sat with my heating pad on and a mug of weak tea, bending over the cloth with the same care I used to reserve for baby blankets and Halloween costumes. It wasn't just embroidery, it was intention. The way I remembered who liked which dessert, who hated raisins, how Paul always folded napkins diagonally. It was my way of being present, my way of saying, "I see you. I know you." Maybe I thought they'd do the same for me in return. We were all gathered at Jenny's house, in the suburbs north of Portland. Big open-concept kitchen, smells of cinnamon candles and catered ham. One of those houses that always feels staged. The kids ran around with phones in their hands, laughing at screens, not each other. I stood in the doorway holding the wrapped gift. It wasn't flashy, just brown paper, twine, and a tiny sprig of rosemary from my garden. Jenny took it last. She was busy handing out labeled envelopes to the kids, gift cards for Target and Sephora. She opened mine with a practiced smile, the kind you wear when you're bracing for disappointment. And then she pulled it out. "Oh," she said, holding it up like it was a curtain sample. "It's handmade?" "It's a tablecloth," I said, "for when we all eat together. Look, everyone's name is stitched around the edges. I thought—" She laughed, a short nasal laugh that sliced through the hum of Christmas jazz playing through the speakers. "Mom, you really don't have to keep doing this. Just send money next time. The kids don't even use stuff like this." I caught Tom's eye. He looked down. The grandkids were too busy unboxing a new VR headset to notice. Jenny folded the cloth, badly I might add, and placed it on the sideboard next to the recycling bin. I smiled. That's what you do. You smile like you didn't hear your daughter compare your work to a burden. You act like the burn in your chest is just indigestion, not the slow singe of being erased. I walked to the kitchen and poured myself a half glass of ginger ale. My hand trembled slightly, but I covered it by straightening the plastic cups on the counter. Later, while they all watched a football game, I stayed in the dining room, refolding the tablecloth properly. Not because I thought she'd change her mind, but because I couldn't bear to leave it like that. My hands knew what they'd made. They deserved that dignity, even if no one else saw it. When I got home that night, I sat on the edge of my bed and looked at my palms. Red around the joints, still smelling faintly of rosemary and cold metal from the zipper of my coat. I didn't cry. Crying implies surprise. This wasn't new. It was just clearer now, more pointed, less deniable, and that's when I made the decision. No more trying to be the kind of mother they'd accept in bite-sized pieces. No more soft gifts for hard people. The next time, I'd give them exactly what they asked for, but not in the way they expected. I waited a week. I wasn't sure why. Maybe part of me thought someone would call. Maybe Jenny, maybe Tom. Not to apologize. That would have been a miracle. Just To say they'd found a place for the tablecloth, that they'd used it maybe, even if only for leftovers. But the phone stayed quiet, except for pharmacy reminders and one scam call about urgent Medicare action. Life has a cruel sense of rhythm sometimes. Jenny's birthday fell on a Sunday. She invited me, of course. She always does, when there's an audience. The email said, "Casual brunch, no gifts necessary," which in her language means, "Come, look nice, bring something tasteful, and leave quietly before 3. I baked lemon bars the way she likes them. Extra tart, dusted with powdered sugar. And I brought a gift. Of sorts. It was a plain white envelope. No card. No bow. Just my name in the return corner and hers in the center. I handed it to her as she greeted me, all fake cheek kisses and overpronounced enthusiasm. "Oh, you didn't have to bring anything, Mom," she said, voice lilting. I smiled and said, "Just a little something. Thought you'd appreciate it." She opened it right there in the foyer, between mimosas and the smell of fresh bagels. She pulled out the envelope, gave it a little shake, looked inside. Her smile faltered. "There's nothing in here." "Yes," I said, folding my hands. "You said last time, just send money." So I did. Air money, very current. For a second, she didn't move. Then she gave that brittle laugh, the kind people use when they don't quite know if they're being mocked or misunderstood. "Okay," she said. "Cute." And then louder, to the room. "Mom's going minimalist this year." Everyone chuckled. No one really knew what had happened, which made it worse. Their laughter just papered over the insult, smoothed it into something palatable. I poured myself a mimosa and took a seat at the edge of the couch, watching her tuck the empty envelope behind a vase of tulips like it was a receipt she didn't want to deal with. By Tuesday, Tom called. I hadn't spoken to him in a while. He has that way of sounding cheerful while scolding you, like he's reading from a customer service script. "Hey, Mom. Look, I don't want to make a big thing out of this, but Jenny's pretty upset. She said you tried to embarrass her at her own party?" "I gave her what she asked for," I said. "That's all." He sighed. "You're making things harder than they need to be. We're trying to include you, and now you're acting like—" He trailed off, but I filled in the blank for him. "Difficult. Ungrateful. Drama." "I've been included," I said quietly, "as background noise, as a dish to pass around, but never as a person." He didn't respond to that, just mumbled something about work and hung up before I could say more. That night, Jenny sent me a message. Not a call, a text. Maybe it's time you considered a community where you'll get the support you need. Somewhere with your own space. Independence. She even attached a link. Sunny Pines Retirement Village. 2-bedroom units. Shuttle service. Monthly dance nights. I didn't respond. Not because I didn't have words, but because I wasn't ready to waste them. A few days later, I noticed the kids had stopped liking my posts. My holiday photos, my bread recipe links. Even the grandkids didn't respond when I commented on their Instagram stories. It was subtle, quiet, but unmistakable. A slow erasure. I'd stepped out of line, and now the punishment was silence. Fine. Let them get quiet. I'd been quiet all my life, but now they'd made the mistake of teaching me how to answer without raising my voice. They came on a Saturday. Jenny and Tom together, which in itself was strange. They rarely coordinated unless it was about something big. Weddings, college plans, or problems that needed a united front. I should have known then, should have seen it in the way Tom carried a folder under his arm, and Jenny brought me coffee from that expensive place she knows I don't like. Burnt, bitter, always lukewarm by the time it gets to me. They settled into the living room like it was theirs. Tom took the armchair. Jenny crossed her legs and smoothed her jeans with too much care. "Mom," she began, "we've been thinking about making life easier. For you." I nodded. I've lived long enough to know that when someone says easier, they mean less complicated for us. Tom opened the folder. I caught a glimpse. Legal letterhead, lots of lines, tiny print. My stomach turned before I even knew why. It's just some paperwork, he said, too casually. House stuff, healthcare proxies, durable power of attorney. You know, just in case. In case of what? I asked. In case something happens, Jenny said quickly. It's really just a formality. Like, making sure we can help if you get sick, or if there's an emergency. I looked at the lines of text, crisp and cold. And the house? Well, Tom said, flipping the page, this part would just make sure it transfers smoothly, if needed, to the family trust. I felt something inside me snap, like an old thread under pressure. So, not mine anymore. It's still yours, Jenny said. But, technically, yes, it would name the trust as future holder. It just avoids probate, Mom. Everyone does it. Everyone who plans to be forgotten, I thought. I stood up. My hands were steady, surprisingly so. No. Tom blinked. No. I'm not signing away my name. Jenny's mouth tightened. You don't trust us? I didn't answer. I didn't have to. Tom closed the folder. Not quickly, not angrily, just with that kind of male finality that says, well, we tried. They left not long after, saying things like, just think about it, and this isn't a fight. But I knew a retreat when I saw one. 2 days later, I got an alert from the bank. My savings account, one I barely touched, left mostly for emergencies, showed a large outgoing transaction. I logged in, blinking hard at the numbers. Thousands gone. Transferred to a secondary account titled Morrison Family Estate Planning. I called the branch. A young man with a voice like maple syrup confirmed it was a standing authorization, set up years ago, when Paul was sick, and I'd signed whatever was put in front of me. Still valid, still legally binding. Jenny was the executor. No one told me, I said. They didn't have to, ma'am, he said. It was already in place. I hung up, cold all over. The next day, the grandkids came by. Unannounced. Just the 2 older ones, Caleb and Ruby. They said Jenny had sent them to help organize my den. I said I hadn't asked for help. They smiled, too polite, and said, we'll be quick. They boxed things up without asking. Old files, drawers of receipts, even my quilting notebooks. When I asked about it, Caleb said, Mom just wants to digitize everything, you know? Back things up. They left with 3 boxes. I watched the car pull away, a tight knot in my chest. That night, I went to my desk. The copy of Paul's will was gone. So were my medical records and the list of my medications I'd printed for the doctor. My laptop had been moved, logged out, oddly. And the copy of my old trust paperwork? Vanished. I called the non-emergency police line. A young officer answered, asked if I had proof of a break-in. I said no, they were family. But they'd taken things, without consent. He sighed. That sounds more like a civil matter, ma'am. You might want to consult a lawyer. So I did. It took 2 bus rides and a 3-block walk to get to a woman named Carla Greer, who worked out of a narrow office above a pharmacy. She had sharp eyes and a sharper voice. She listened, didn't interrupt, just nodded, made notes. They're consolidating control, she said when I finished. Financial, legal, physical access. I've seen it before. What do I do? You get ahead of it. She gave me a list. A new will, medical directives, revocation of prior powers. We scheduled a second meeting, and before I left, she looked me square in the face and said, do not tell them you're doing this. Not yet. That evening, I brewed tea and stared at the window. Outside, the last leaves were falling from the dogwood tree. I thought about how they never scream when they let go. They just fall. Silent. Certain. Not this time. Not me. Let them guess what's coming. They taught me that silence can be powerful. Now it's my turn to make them listen. The house sold faster than I expected. Cash offer, no inspection, just like Carla predicted. A family moving from Sacramento wanted to close before the new year. I signed the papers with a strange sense of calm, like I was watching someone else's life change from the outside. And then I packed my essentials: birth certificate, old photos, the brooch Paul gave me on our 25th anniversary, and moved into a roadside motel just off Route 99. Room 206, ground floor. Smelled like Lysol and bad coffee, but it was mine. I didn't tell anyone. Not Tom, not Jenny. Certainly not the grandkids. I needed the silence. I needed to see how long it would take them to notice they'd lost something they thought they controlled. Turns out, not long. On the third morning, there was a knock on the motel door. Not a pounding, just 3 neat taps. I was sipping coffee from the styrofoam cup the front desk called breakfast, flipping through a paperback I'd read a dozen times. When I opened the door, 2 people stood there. A woman in a slate blue blazer and a man holding a clipboard. She smiled gently but with a practiced edge. "Mrs. Morrison?" she asked. "Yes. I'm Danielle with Adult Protective Services. This is Officer Lynn from the local sheriff's office. Do you have a moment?" I let them in, because refusing would have made it worse. Danielle explained that they'd received a report. Concerns about my mental state, erratic behavior, possible financial mismanagement. She said it softly, like a nurse delivering bad news she'd rehearsed. "They said I might be a danger to myself?" I asked. "There are indicators," she replied without looking at me. Tom. It had to be Tom. That phony calm. That voice that always made cruelty sound like concern. They asked about my medications, my doctor, whether I'd eaten. They asked why I sold my house so quickly. Danielle scribbled notes when I told her it was my right. The officer stayed quiet, eyes flicking to my hands, my face, the single suitcase near the dresser. Danielle took out a form. "We're not taking action today," she said, "but we are placing a temporary freeze on your power of attorney until we determine full capacity." "I revoked the old one," I said, reaching for the folder Carla had made for me. I handed over the notarized revocation, the new living will, the letter from my doctor. Danielle skimmed the documents but said, "We'll need to verify these through our legal department. In the meantime, someone from our office may call, possibly visit again." When they left, I stood in the doorway watching the parking lot, my hand still on the doorframe. It was only 10 in the morning, but I felt exhausted. I called Carla. "Expected it," she said. "They're playing hardball now. It's a standard move. Pressure, doubt, documentation delay. I'm not incompetent." "You don't have to prove that to me," she said. "We'll get a statement from your physician, maybe even push for a court hearing. You have every right to fight this." "Why do I have to fight for what's already mine?" "Because you scared them," she said. "They don't know what you'll do next. That makes you dangerous." That night, I went through my things again, looking for anything else they might twist. My bank statements, my old will, even Paul's letters. I didn't trust anything to stay safe anymore. 2 days later, the motel manager handed me a certified letter. Jenny's name was in the return address. Inside, a polite but chilling request that I consider formal guardianship for ease of coordination. Enclosed was a draft petition. They were filing for full conservatorship. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I walked 2 miles to Carla's office with the envelope in my coat pocket and the ache of something ancient tightening in my chest. This wasn't just about paperwork anymore. They wanted to make me disappear. Legally, quietly. At Carla's desk, I laid it all out. "I want to go to court," I said. She nodded once, and for the first time, I saw something like real fire in her eyes. Then let's show them what a woman they thought was powerless can do. The courtroom was colder than I expected. Not in temperature, though the air conditioning had that metallic chill I always hated in public buildings. No, it was colder in atmosphere. Sterile, quiet, almost reverent, like a church where the only religion was paperwork and precedence. Jenny sat 2 rows ahead of me, dressed like she was running for office. Gray blazer, soft pink blouse, hair done too carefully to look effortless. Tom was next to her, tapping his pen against his knee. Neither of them looked at me. I wasn't sure if that was shame or strategy. I sat beside Carla. She had her hair pulled back in a braid, glasses perched low on her nose, a yellow legal pad covered in the tight, angular handwriting of a woman who never forgot details. I trusted her more than I'd trusted anyone in years. The judge was late. When he finally walked in, everyone rose like they were trained to do, and I suddenly felt 1,000 years old. The hearing began with the petition, Tom's affidavit about my sudden erratic behavior, the house sale, the motel, the empty envelope on Jenny's birthday. The lawyer they hired leaned into each moment like it was a nail they intended to drive straight through my reputation. She's confused, they said. She's isolating. She's vulnerable to exploitation. She's retaliating, I whispered to Carla. That's what they mean. I stopped being useful. When Carla stood, it felt like the room tilted back into balance. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She presented the updated medical assessment. Dr. Mendoza, my physician of 12 years, had written a glowing statement about my mental clarity and independence. She read excerpts from the revocation of prior powers, showed time-stamped documents, even a notarized letter from the new homeowners verifying my sale was voluntary, above board, and efficient. And then she asked if I wanted to speak. I wasn't sure. My throat felt tight. But I stood. I'm not here because I made a mistake, I said, voice steadier than I expected. I'm here because I stopped doing what they expected. I said no, and suddenly I became a problem to manage. The judge watched me, no expression. I spent my whole life giving to these people. Raising, feeding, sewing, cooking, loaning. I gave when it cost me sleep. I gave when I had nothing left to give. And now that I've decided to live on my own terms, they're saying I can't be trusted with my own life. Jenny finally looked at me then. But I didn't return the gaze. I'm not confused. I'm not sick. I'm not dangerous. I just stopped being silent. The judge asked a few follow-up questions. Polite, measured, and then he ruled. The petition for conservatorship was denied. No further action to be taken. Power of attorney formally and legally revoked. Full autonomy affirmed. Jenny closed her eyes when the words were read. Tom stared straight ahead. I felt nothing for them. Not relief, not vengeance. Just release. Outside the courthouse, Carla clapped me once on the shoulder. That was a damn fine speech. It wasn't a speech, I said. It was the truth. Same difference in here, she said. I didn't go home to celebrate. I went to the diner across from the courthouse, ordered a turkey club and a slice of lemon meringue pie. No one there knew who I was or what I'd just done. And that anonymity tasted better than the pie. When I got back to the motel, there were no messages, no texts, no emails. Just the quiet hum of the air conditioner and the soft weight of being alone. But for the first time in months, I didn't feel lonely. I felt sovereign. I found the apartment by accident. A flyer pinned to the bulletin board at the library. Senior-friendly housing available, quiet community, pet welcome. It wasn't fancy. 2 rooms, narrow balcony, linoleum floors that echoed when you walked barefoot. But the windows faced west, and in the afternoons, the light poured in like a warm confession. I signed the lease that same day. The landlord's name was Bev. She had wild gray curls, wore sandals in winter, and brought me soup the first night without asking if I wanted it. Split pea, she said. My husband hated it. That's why I make it now. Because I can. We laughed. Really laughed. The kind that feels like an exhale after holding your breath for too long. I unpacked slowly. No one rushed me. No one hovered. I put my sewing machine on a little table by the window, framed Paul's photo on the bookshelf beside a cactus I named Clyde. I hung my own quilts on the wall. Not the best ones, not the neatest stitches, just the ones that felt most like me. A month passed. One afternoon, Bev invited me to a group meeting at the church down the road. Nothing heavy, she promised. Just women talking about getting older and getting louder. I went, sat in a folding chair, paper cup of lukewarm coffee in hand, surrounded by women who had been caretakers, afterthoughts, second choices for most of their lives. When they asked if anyone wanted to speak, I stood without thinking. I gave my daughter an empty envelope, I said. She asked for money. I gave her nothing, and that was the first time she noticed I was there. The room didn't gasp. They nodded. Soft, slow nods, like trees swaying under a wind they all knew by name. After the meeting, a woman with tight white curls and a cane came up to me. Her name was Marnie. "My son's trying to get me into a home," she whispered. "Says I fall too much." "Do you?" "I trip," she said, over his excuses. I smiled, then reached into my bag and handed her Carla's card. "She won't pity you, but she'll help you fight." The next morning, I opened a letter from the county court. The financial restitution case was closed. Jenny and Tom had been ordered to return a portion of the funds they'd withdrawn. Not a fortune, but enough. Enough to pay my rent for a year. Enough to remind them that consequences have a paper trail. I didn't call to tell them I'd won. I didn't need to. Instead, I sat at my sewing machine and began working on a new project. Something small. A lap quilt. Bright oranges and deep blues. Messy corners. Uneven stitching. I wasn't making it for anyone else. Not for birthdays or holidays or obligations. Just for me. For the space I had claimed and the woman I had finally become. The sun dipped low outside the window, casting long shadows across the floor. I poured myself a glass of iced tea, opened the window, and listened to the breeze move through the trees. There was no applause, no tearful reunion, just peace. And that, after everything, was more than enough.